and welcome to Win the Margins. Today, we are excited to have as our guest Dr. Jessica Clegg DeHart, who is an associate professor of community and global health at Claremont Graduate University. Jessica, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
You know, as I was reading up into some of your background, you know, of course, it's notable that you are particularly passionate around the areas of cancer research and support for cancer survivors. And I wanted to see if you might talk a little bit about your journey into higher education and how your passions in particular around issues surrounding those affected by cancer. How did that interest develop in your own life? So I was wondering if you talk a little bit about your journey.
So first off, do you have 10 hours? I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's been, everything's been driven by passion, but not just that, almost a serendipitous journey. I guess I have to start with the fact that I'm adopted, and I'm adopted because my mom had ovarian cancer when she was young. And so my parents couldn't have children. So right off the bat, cancer kind of started my journey. And since that day zero, right, I've been kind of guided in that direction. Even when I thought, you know, maybe I want to do this, the doors opened in the cancer arena. And I just fell in love with research. I was a ballerina, but at the same time, I would dye my parents' kitchen sink blue because I was wanting to do science experiments. And from a very, very young age, I knew that I wanted to do something different. And even though I was a ballerina, I hurt my knee when I was a junior in high school. And so I had a lot of time on my hands, and my grandfather was going through cancer treatment at USC. So I started driving him to his appointments, and I would just ask, why does he have it? Why does he have it? And the doctor said, have you ever thought about going into medicine? And I said, you know, not really, but science, and I always want to know why. And so I ended up going to USC for my undergrad, and I was pre-med, but then I found out there was something called health promotion, disease prevention, where you could really figure out why people were getting a specific disease, and not just the why they were getting it, but how do we prevent them from getting it in the first place? And fell in love with epidemiology, so study of disease. One door opened after another, ended up doing my master's in public health. I mean, all this you already know, but it was my passion that drove me forward because it was hard. Everyone knows grad school is hard. Everyone knows science is hard, but my need to really answer those questions is what pushed me forward. Studying a lot of the biology behind cancer. But honestly, what really drove me to helping cancer survivors was the fact that I was working with a lot of women and men who had gone through cancer, and they would go through our studies, but then they always would say, now what? And I couldn't answer that question. Now what? What am I supposed to do next? And I'd give them the internet spiel on 150 minutes of exercise a day, this and that. And they say, but how? Now what? After 2 decades of research, women were still asking me the same question, and saying, you know, not everything fits who I am. I don't want to do yoga, or that's not important to me, or in my community, what's important to me? How am I supposed to get food? What food am I supposed to be eating? Now what? And then my mom was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And I got to see firsthand where that now what was coming from. And I really decided, yes, I love researching the biology, but I really feel that there are millions of women and men out there that need scientists like myself and my colleagues to start focusing on survivorship, and helping them to answer now what. So there's a lot more to it, but in a nutshell, that's really what drove me to really study cancer survivorship.
And some of your biomaterials, and I think you alluded to it here. I read that your research tackles, biologically based, wellness intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And, from COVID to cancer to everything else, we know that when it comes to impact on minority communities, of course, there is a disproportionately negative impact when it comes to cancer, right? And when it comes to treatment, when it comes to survival, we see a dividing line often on race and class when it comes to who is surviving these cancers, even though, of course, it's an epidemic that affects so very, very many.
Right.
I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about that, because when I was looking here at some of your research, I believe that some of it was focused on, if I'm reading correctly, breast and ovarian cancer in Hispanic women, in particular in some of your postdoc work. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the disproportionately negative impact on minority communities, in particular, when it comes to cancer. What, in your experience in research, have you found effective, perhaps, in helping to reverse some of these disturbing trends?
I would have to say that the research that I did in that area was some of the most exciting research that I've done. And I speak, I think, on behalf of the research community, that there hasn't been enough research in marginalized communities, in diverse communities. And that's the number one issue, is we can't give recommendations and guidelines if the research hasn't been done. And I will say that a lot more is being done, but every time you want to give a recommendation, it can't just be based on research that was done among white women with breast cancer. It needs to be in diverse communities. So one of my goals has always been, in all of our research on my team needs to be diverse. We need to make sure that we are, community-based, that we're tailoring recommendations based on what different, women and men need, what they want. And that is going to be different depending on where they come from, and how diverse each of those communities are. So the research that I was doing really spawned from there not being a lot of genetic research within the Hispanic community. I come from a Hispanic background. My biological mom and my adopted mom are both Mexican American. And I would do a lot of research on, what are the mutations in breast cancer and in ovarian cancer that are out there. And most of them were documented in non-Hispanic Caucasian women. And so on the team in the laboratory that I worked on for my postdoc, we expanded that and we decided, let's look in Hispanic communities. Is it different? Are there different mutations? And yes, there were. We found different mutations, which was really exciting. We were able to track those into ancient areas in Mexico and look at diaspora into, from Spain and from Africa. And so it was really interesting to me, and it was eye-opening because it was different. And it showed the world, we have to be looking in multiple populations and in diverse populations if we're to move science forward, honestly, and if we're to help all communities, and especially those that are most affected by breast cancer and have the worst outcomes.
Also, if you talk a little bit about your work at Claremont Graduate University, interestingly, we write quite a bit at Diverse on, how scholars transition to advocates in many ways, in so much that their scholarship becomes, an agent of change. And so I was wondering if you could talk about that journey, because of course, in your background, inevitably, because this issue touches so many lives, your scholarship in many ways has transitioned to advocacy work, really looking to see how families most impacted by cancer can be supported and get the information they need, because I see that a lot of your research talks about lifestyle and different other elements that go into effective cancer treatment, preventing recurrence. And even as a cancer survivor myself, I find this work so fascinating. So I was wondering if you could talk about this balance here between scholar and advocate around cancer issues. I don't know if you speak a little bit about that.
That's a fantastic question, because I've worked in laboratories and I've worked in clinics. One of the main reasons I decided to go to Claremont Graduate University was the focus on translational, transdisciplinary work, but also that huge focus on the community and being an advocate in the community. Every study that my colleagues and I have been doing, I mean, in the lab, we come up with similar results, right? We know exercise is good. We know that balanced nutrition is good. We know that sleep is good, et cetera. Stress is bad, right? We keep coming up with that. But how do you get people to do it? And I still remember the conversation I had with one of my mentors over coffee. And we were saying, what if we find that you have to run a marathon a day? Mm-hmm. Who's going to do that? Like, we need to change our focus. We need to always have that balance between finding that scientific discovery, being a scholar, right? But being an advocate for those that the science is going to affect. And that's been at the heart of my research. And I've had fantastic mentors that have really, made sure that I'm always focused on that. Like, who is it affecting? Will people do it? And Claremont Graduate University, everything they do is focused on the community and really making sure that whatever we do as scholars impacts the wider community in a positive way. So there are very few places where you can be a scholar and an advocate. I will say that at Claremont Graduate University, I feel that I can do that. I can do both. And not always, running and searching for the money, but yes, getting money to do the research, but making sure that it means something, that it's valuable to the community. And the cancer community, as you know, really needs advocates. We need in survivorship. There needs to be advocates with the voice saying, this is what people need, this is what people want. And advocates, I would say the number one thing is to listen. So oftentimes my research has taken a U-turn, because I've said, hey, what do you all think of this? And they're like, yeah, no way. Or that's fantastic, let's run with it. And so my research recently is actually based on listening to a group of breast cancer survivors and advocates. When I sat down with them and said, what do you want me to do? If I could do anything, what is it that you want me to do? And they said, answer the now what, and make sure that when you're answering that, it's community-based and it's locally tailored and it's for everyone and it's free. So I said, okay. And so we started the Light Foundation. And that's really, and I don't think I could have done that anywhere but CGU.
Yeah. And I was wondering if you talk a little bit more about the Light Foundation, because, I'm interested in what you just mentioned. You mentioned that as a scholar, you have the opportunity to talk to those who are most affected by your scholarship, to say, what do you want from me? And of course, we know that's missing.
Yeah.
When it comes to scholarship, right? It's more driven based on other factors, and the effect to which scholarship translates to the real world. That's not always a straight line, in the ways that it really should be when it comes to issues of life and death, because you are dealing with issues of life and death. And so I was wondering if you could talk about the Light Foundation, how it was developed and conceived, and what are your goals when it comes to what you want to see this foundation accomplish, let's say 10 years out?
So the Light Foundation has been a wild and beautiful ride. It's almost been a year since it started. And it's happened very quickly, which again is that those doors opening. I know it's the right thing to do, because everything's kind of coming together very quickly. Every summer I am a faculty member for the National Breast Cancer Coalition's Project Lead Institute. And I'm going there next week to teach again. And this institute is to really prepare breast cancer survivors and those affected by breast cancer to become educated advocates on the Hill for breast cancer. So we teach everything from biology, genetics to epidemiology, you name it. And one of the nights we have a conversation where us as faculty can talk about our research. And it was last year that I sat around a table with a group of women and asked that question. If I were a blank slate and I had the resources, at my hands, at your disposal, what would you want me to do? And we had a 3-hour conversation about answering now what, and not being okay with the new normal. They don't want a new normal. They want to thrive. They want to do more than survive, but they need to know how. And it can't just be searching through the internet. And some women were saying, well, we have this program where we have yoga and this and that, and it's free. And another woman said, I don't have that in my community. And another woman said, I don't have that in my community. So I said, well, what if we were to build a system of charters that were locally based and locally tailored to your community in the language that you want, based on your needs? There was obviously a lot of enthusiasm. So I ruminated on it for a few weeks, and I talked to my boss actually at Claremont Graduate University, so my dean, and I said, I've been thinking about this for a long time. Maybe when I'm, 5 years from now, it's something to do. And he says, you need to do it now. I said, okay. He's like, you need to start a foundation. Like this needs to happen. You just pitched it to me. It needs to happen now. And so I said, okay, well, I don't know how to do that. And he sent me a book. So I read a book and said, all right, well, what I've learned from everyone I've talked to is nobody knows how to do it. You just do it. And I contacted the women that were around that table and said, do you guys want to do this? Because if so, I'll spearhead it. And they said, yes. Came up with the name Light, Lyte. And that came from living your truth empowered, not the doctor's truth, not your coworkers, your colleagues, your mom's, your dad's truth, but your truth. Where is it that you personally want to be after cancer treatment? And then how do we empower you to get there? We're not, we're to give you the tools. And so that's where the name came from. Within a few months, we are now a 501c3 foundation. We are going to be piloting our program in the fall, and we'll be fully up and running in spring. And what that looks like is we're starting locally in Claremont just to pilot, but we will have charters nationally, and each charter will be community-based and will provide free health and health coaching and wellness navigation for breast cancer survivors. And they will be based on needs assessments. So it's very tailored to that specific community. And in order to grow a workforce that is able to do the health and wellness coaching, anybody who wants to do the coaching for Light can go through free training through Light as well. And so we have a national board health and wellness coaching training program that we will provide anybody who wants to do health and wellness coaching for breast cancer survivors.
I also wanted to ask you about this whole push to encourage more girls and women to pursue STEM as careers, right? Mm-hmm. I was struck by the hashtag Mama Scientist, right? And so not only the concept is encouraging more girls and women to pursue STEM, but to also promote that it is possible to be a mother and scientist, right? And we know that oftentimes it becomes a choice, right? Even when it comes to things like the tenure clock in mm-hmm. academia, we've talked for years about, is the tenure clock, equitable for young female faculty who desire to have a family, right? Is making the clock standard for everybody equitable and fair and in line with a stated goal to encourage more women to be scientists. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about this whole issue of women and STEM and how your work has impacted that work in terms of encouraging more girls and women to pursue STEM careers.
You hit the nail on the head with the second reason I wanted to go to CGU is to teach and to show other women in science that you can do it. And you can be a mom and you can be a scientist at the same time. And you actually don't need to compromise. You just need to be creative and flexible and know that your path isn't going to look like everyone else's. And I think that's been the problem, is this sense of don't talk about your family, don't keep that personal, keep that out of line, because then you won't progress in your career. People are going to judge you. And I was in that mentality for a long time. And finally I said, well, how are we going to break that? How do we break that? Unless we talk about it, unless we have these discussions. And imagine the brilliant scientists that are out there that are not doing science because they think they can't. That's sad to me, because they're brilliant. They could be pushing science forward and having kids at the same time, and their kids see that they're doing it. And then there's a whole new generation. So I decided, again, I feel like all my research, everything I do is upstream. It's against the grain, but to talk about my family and to say, yeah, I do bake cakes and I plan parties, and sometimes I'm writing a grant at the same time. And, I have pictures of my kids jumping on me when I'm writing grants, and in no way did I ever compromise. I just do it. And it might be at weird hours. My youngest was on 14 flights before he was a year old. Wow. Because I had to travel and speak, but I didn't compromise. I said, no, but my child's coming with me, because it was really important to me to nurse, you know what I mean? And so it's really getting off the blogs, not listening to what people say you should do, and really going in with your gut and knowing that your science is good. And at the same time, you can be a good mom. And so I really wanted to teach, to let other women in science know, whether you choose to have children or not, you can do either. And you can be just as brilliant of a scientist and be as productive, oftentimes more productive, because you feel like you need to do more to prove yourself as everybody else. And so I've all my classes, I make sure that they are family friendly. There are times where families, anybody who has children can come to class. If their kids are bouncing on their lap, it's fine. I'm really open-minded that way. And I try to think, what would I have wanted? And how can I provide that to the next generation? Show them that it's possible, so that we can really open up this conversation and make a difference and have more women, mommy or mama scientists in research. And I will say that CGU is very open to that, especially in my department, especially during COVID, when I was teaching 2 children. Just being seen, being heard made it possible. I know a lot of women, colleagues of mine, quit. That was kind of the last straw during COVID. They were like, I can't do this. This is not possible. We're seeing all of our colleagues without children having more time to write, more time to do grants, whereas our time was filled with teaching our children at the same time as trying to still keep up with the tenure clocks and whatnot. But with at CGU, I didn't have that. Yes, it was stressful, but the flexibility that was provided really, kept me in science. So I really want to pay that forward and show others that you can do it.
My last question, Jessica, and I just thank you so much again for joining us, is with regards to, what message for the young female scholars, who are listening, who are going upstream, right? Underrepresented minorities and majority departments that, really are not vested in them. thinking about quitting, thinking about say, hey, you know, I need to go to private, I need to go to a private industry, right? Where, you know, the money is better and the pressure is less, even though I have a passion for research, right? And so I was wondering if you have any last words for people who may have been, who are on your track, right? You know, who may be, you know, have a passion for research, but, you know, for various reasons, you know, want to just say, you know what, it's not worth the struggle. It's not worth, you know, going through all of the politics of higher academia. I've got kids and, you know, listen, industry money is calling. Even though I want to be a researcher and make a difference, I don't think it's possible. So, you know, as we conclude, I just want to see if you might have a word for people who are on the path that you have walked as to why it was worth it for you.
Ooh, that's a toughie because it's hard. It is hard. Just in academia in general, your life is getting knocked down, right? Rejected with papers, rejected for grants, constant. And then you add being in a population that's not always, that has a harder time. And that push to leave can be so strong. What has kept me in multiple things, but the advice I would have to give is that it's going to be hard. No matter, it's going to be hard. I wish I could say it gets easier and it's going to be fine, but I think I would be lying to you, and that would be a disservice to say that. As young women, we're told we can do it. We can do anything, right? And just power through and you can do it. You can do it. But nobody tells you how hard it's going to be. And it can be brutally hard. And I want to say that now, so you know what to expect. So women know what to expect. But what keeps me going is I find those things that make me tick. And for every single person, it's going to be different. And so for me, it's the student that gets it or says, you know, like Professor DeHart, you did this for me. And now I have, you know, this opportunity, or thank you so much for helping me with my family. And now I can continue school. Those kudos, those making a difference in an individual's life push me forward. When I go, I don't think I can do this anymore, I will get an email and I'll go, wow, yes, I can. Or, you know, pushing forward and helping a patient, helping a breast cancer survivor. Those little things will be the sparks that keep you going. And for those who choose to be mama scientists, my kiddos, again, there's times everybody's going to have that moment where you go, is this really what I want to be doing? And I'm very open with my boys, and we talk about science and mama's career and all this. And I'll say, I don't know, you know, sometimes I want mom, and they'll cut me off. Your students need you. Like, you need to be a scientist, mom, and you need to be a professor and a doctor and all these things. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, I really want to spend more time with you. But you are, mom. And I would have to say, remember that you are enough. And remember that not everybody is given the gift to do science and to do science well. And if you have that gift, you owe it to the world to share that gift. And if you can remember that and push through, I promise you there will be positives on the other end. And then you'll have the next moment where you go, I can't believe I was thinking about quitting. What was I thinking? So find those things that make you tick in your job. Find the things that keep you going in your life, whether that be family or a hobby. I love baking, French cooking, martial arts. Those make me tick. I make time for them. And remember that there's a lot of us and professors like me out there. Just the conversation hasn't been started. So if we all start having that conversation, you're going to find that there's a lot of people like you out there, and that we're here to support you and here to support each other. And you don't need to compromise. You can do it. You can absolutely do it. Even if people say you can't, you can. I promise you.
Well, Jessica, I just want to say thank you so very much for joining us for In the Margins. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I think that our listeners will have gained tremendous knowledge, insight, and understanding from listening to your insights. So thanks again, Jessica. Appreciated the conversation. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome.